and working in the corporate America, I was replaceable. When I left my job, somebody else could step in and go ahead and finish those projects and the rest of that. But whenever I make a work of art, I'm the only person on the planet that can make that work of art.
I used to ask my grandparents this question of what's something that you think you liked better about when you were a kid or a young man that you think actually was better, and then something you think has changed that is definitely for the better. Sometimes people just have an over-romantic vision of the past, but then sometimes they also won't accept the good things that are happening in the present.
I don't necessarily believe that God has his hand on you and is guiding you at every moment throughout your life. And I don't know if you remember the old GPS units, but they would be recalculating how he's going to get you from here to here, what kind of signposts he might put up for you to follow a particular fork in the path. But just because that signpost is there doesn't mean that you're going to follow it.
This is the Lifted Spirits podcast, where we raise a glass, share encouraging thoughts and stories, and discuss how we find meaning through family, friendship, art, business, and everything in between. Today I interviewed Randy Spence, who is a retired engineer and now focuses on his painting and artworks. And so we discuss the constant struggle between his right and left brain and how religious tradition informs his practice, and just some reminiscing on the good old days, quote unquote, versus the present day. So enjoy the conversation.
This is Randy. And before we get into...
This is the camera I should be talking to?
Oh, you can talk to me.
Okay.
We just kind of pretend like the cameras aren't even here.
All right.
But before we get too much into who you are and what you do, I like starting with the question, just what's the best thing that's happened to you in the past month?
The best thing that's happened to me in the past month? That would have been traveling to Ireland.
Okay.
And being in Ireland for a week with my little brother.
All right. What was that for?
Just for fun, vacation. Yeah. So, we were over there for 2 weeks, and we spent the second week in Ireland with my brother and his wife, and we'd never traveled together as adults or anything like that. And, we've been to family gatherings and things, but never just he and I, since we were kids, kind of hanging out together, and we just had a incredible, great time. Laughed a lot. And in fact, I don't think I've laughed that much. In 1 week, I laughed more than probably I have in the entire last year or more. So, it was great.
And what part of Ireland were you in?
That part of the trip, we were down in a town called Kenmare, and then went to Galway, and then across to Dublin, returned to Dublin.
Gotcha.
So,
they're down in Waterford, which is southwest or southeast Ireland, I think, is where our family's from. And there's a thing called the Power Family Clan Gathering that happens every 3 years, where all the Powers go back to the castle. Have a big reunion. And so I've only been once. My family's been a few times, but it's kind of expensive. So we went 2019.
So are you related to the the Powers distillery?
I'm sure there's not enough to get any royalties, I wish, but I'm sure there's some sort of connection there with all the Powers connection and the Power estate and those sorts of things. So maybe one day maybe we can get a sponsorship from Powers Whiskey. This is a spirits podcast.
Yeah, right. So Powers, and did you say Waterford? Yeah, we went through Waterford at one point and visited the Waterford showroom and saw some of their crazy, ridiculous designs that they've got for crystals. So cool.
Yeah. And then also I like people ask questions like, what do you do? What do you like? I really like the question, what are you like? So if you had to describe yourself, how would you describe yourself?
What am I like? Oh, wow. That's I would say I'm like a schizophrenic in a way, in that my professional career was in engineering. I started out, though, in radio, TV, and film, but moved over to engineering and spent my professional career in engineering software and ended up in software project management. But I've also been an artist the whole time.
Yeah.
And now that I'm retired, focusing more on my my artwork. So it's this. I'm like somebody that's just my entire life has been kind of battling between my right and left
Yeah.
brain, you know. But you know, I'm really glad and thankful that I have skills in both of those areas. So
Yeah. What's your favorite part of being caught between those worlds, and then the hardest part of being caught between those worlds?
Well, the hardest part is probably easier to answer, and especially as I was in my professional career, because um, working in the professional engineering realm is very demanding, and so it's really hard to switch gears at the end of the day and like go from just a kind of a real analytical, scientific approach to things to turning that off and letting go and trying to be, you know, more creative. So that was kind of the hardest thing. Um, but I guess what the best part about it now is that I can integrate both of those things. I can call upon my engineering when I have to, but also just not be so involved in it that I can't just turn it off and immerse myself in the creative side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure that there's a big gap between those two worlds, and a lot of people can't bridge that gap. And so what do you think it is about you that makes you be able to do both?
I don't know. I just see them, you know, both aspects of my personality like that as, you know, as gifts. And I don't know what allows me. It's I don't know that it allows me so much as I just reach a point where I can't control it. I just have to do it. And I would reach, especially during my professional career as an engineer, I would go, you know, months, weeks, months without really doing anything much creative. But then finally something had to break out, and I just have to sit down and knock out a painting or a sculpture or something like that.
Yeah, and have you always been artistically inclined, or did that start somewhere along?
It started surfacing in high school. Although I have found paintings that my mom did when she was a girl, so she had an artistic bent. And my dad also, one of my earliest memories from probably, I don't know, third or fourth grade, I remember him one summer, he got an oil painting set and started doing some oil paintings. And just out of nowhere, he was doing these really competent oil paintings. And I remember one summer in particular where this was in the middle of Illinois, and this was the days when they didn't have air conditioning in houses, and just the middle of the summer, he was there in our dining room with an easel set up and doing a painting and just his shirt off and just sweating. And
Yeah, and you'd sent some pictures of various parts of your work, and I could stitch those into the video, but you've got quite an array of works. But if you had to share some of the ones that were maybe most resonant with you, you could just describe them and we can put pictures in.
Yeah, so you know, when we take a look at them, you can see elements of the engineering aspect of it, but there are other areas where it's kind of more freeform and more abstract. And as an engineer, for most of my career, you know, professional career, I didn't really get to find where I wanted my art to go. So a lot of the time was spent just proving to myself that I could paint. And paint in representationally as well as kind of in an abstract realm as well. So this actually started several years ago, but I started coming up recently with this idea of, and probably about the last 10 years or so, this idea of a representation of the Holy Family nativity. And I wanted to start out with a completely minimalistic view of that. And so I came up with a very hard-edged, hard-edged kind of modern view of it. But then I wanted to take it and kind of interpret it from the perspective of different 20th century artists who wouldn't and didn't do that type of subject matter. So, for instance, I've done one with, that looks like a Mondrian. I've done one that looks like Rene Magritte. I've got ideas in my mind to do one like Jackson Pollock, and just kind of take that subject matter, but approach it as somebody from the 20th century art world might have done it. And in the process of doing that, though, I've also I've been learning about kind of doing an art history for myself, learning art history, but also kind of getting into the heads of the artist, that how they painted and why they painted the way that they did. And probably the one that I really learned the most from and have really appreciated his work, come to appreciate his work much more, was Mark Rothko. And so, that was a very important work for me. Kind of a totally abstract, his kind of cloud figures that he's got. But then I also did one after that, in Rene Magritte's style, which is very representational. And
I actually don't know that name. I'll have to look up his work.
Okay, well, he's the one who you may have seen. There's a picture of just a smoker's pipe sitting on a canvas, and underneath it says, "This is not a pipe." In French, it says, "This is not a pipe." And of course, his joke is, it's not a pipe; it's a picture of a pipe. And so I did one of the Holy Family Nativity, and mine is entitled, "This is not a nativity," but it is a nativity. And what I did with that painting was just take pieces of a bunch of his different paintings and kind of collage them together as an oil painting and put them together to create that scene.
Yeah.
So the other one that you might be familiar with, really familiar with, is there's a picture of a man standing on a seashore with a bowler hat. There's a green apple in front of his face.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, the title of that painting is The Son of Man.
Oh.
So
okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I've got him in this painting, and he is actually represents Joseph in the Holy Family. So
yeah, I learned not too long ago that Anderson means son of man, like the surname. And because I think I was watching some video about the Matrix, and it's Neo, or what's his name? Is it Thomas Anderson? No, I can't remember his actual name, but it's something Anderson, Mr. Anderson. And so he's the son of man figure, like the Christological figure in the Matrix, of course. And would you say there's a common theme or message that you like to convey in your art?
No common theme. I actually didn't come back to my father's house until about 2012. So between the time I was about 18 until I was about 58, I was pretty much an agnostic, borderline atheist.
Okay.
So,
my last interview I actually did was with my brother, sort of on how he finds meaning as an atheist apart from organized religion. Because everyone has their way of tapping into what's valuable, and a lot of what I want this podcast to be is finding common threads between all sorts of backgrounds and socioeconomic statuses and artists and religions, of what are the common things that everyone can say, this lifts the world, this lifts our spirits, this makes the world a better place. And maybe if we do more of those things, we can chisel away at the details around and come to more of a common agreement on some other things.
So I've been working on this series of the Holy Family Nativity, but I'm also kind of delving more into the crucifixion, and that was my most recent work, which was Station 10 in the
I'll definitely. You should
Stations of the
describe it. I can put a picture of it,
Uh-huh.
but it was something. It was
Well,
hanging, not just. It was an installation, not
yeah,
just.
it was definitely a sculptural painting,
Yeah,
and
I've never seen something quite like that. So uh, yeah, I just find it really impressive when someone does something from a different vantage point because it wasn't a sculpture, like just a sculpture. It wasn't
no,
just a painting because there were several paintings hanging and they were on both sides. There were things on both sides and it was three-dimensional.
yeah, it was. I've actually had that idea for 4 or 5 years before executing it this year, and it just so happened that the Stations of the Cross and where CTK meets lent itself to being able to hang it that way, and so actually prepared the canvases about 5 years ago, but they've just been kind of in storage. I've been lugging them around, and so I had the idea in my mind, but the opportunity came, and so I grabbed it.
Yeah.
But it was a real undertaking because it was 12 canvases that I had to execute within about a 6-week period if once I decided to do it. Not to mention kind of working through the engineering part of it, of hanging it from the ceiling and
Yeah.
mounting it and all that.
And it had, am I remembering right that it had nails that were going
Yes.
through too?
Yes.
So
Yeah, so I had to make the nails, and it was an interesting piece because for me, what I first had to do was to do the painting of his torso and his feet and his hands, unwounded. And then I had to wound those images.
wow.
And so it was like I was the one who was having to crucify Christ in the process of doing the work. And so it was very, very emotional. And not to mention the fact that just from a perspective of you create this thing and you do as good a job as you can with it, this representation of the torso. But then I had to take that painting and basically take a box cutter to the back of it and cut the stripes into his back. And I didn't know what was going to happen at that point. I didn't know how this whole thing was. And if it had totally ruined the whole thing at that point, then I would have been at least in trouble in terms of getting the exhibition up. But so it was an emotionally wrenching, piece to execute.
Yeah, because it was like the hands and the feet.
Yeah,
and the torso,
then I had right. I had to take
all
the hands
separate.
and take the nails that I'd made and actually drive them through the canvas, and it was a tough.
It's very engaging just by its nature, like not something you could just walk past. There are, maybe this is just I'm not artistic enough, but there are a lot of pieces I can just walk by, won't grab my eye enough. But something like that just begs your attention and you kind of say, what's going on here? So it was quite a work, and good job on that.
Well, thank you.
And what would you say, well, there's so many questions I want to ask you. You brought up so many things, so I'll figure out where to start. But also, you can take a sip of this. This is one of our non-alcoholic whiskeys. They're like whiskey alternatives, so it's not whiskey, but it's something you can sip on at 11 a.m. and it not get you drunk. So that's nice.
That is nice. Well, sláinte.
Sláinte. And it's kind of twangy. Gives some kick. There's some better and worse.
It does have a little kick
some
to it,
spice.
doesn't it? Yeah.
I like the spice.
Good.
And so let's see. Let's start with, I'd be interested to hear some. We'll circle back around to some of your pieces, but I'd be interested to hear some more of your spiritual journey, of you saying you kind of were at a different place, and why have you come to a place of faith, I suppose, and what is it that made you find that meaning in life?
Well, I think a large factor in the whole thing was the birth of my daughter in 1993. And
I'm a 1993 baby.
oh,
What's
you
her
are
birthday?
December 2nd.
Okay, I'm January, so that's the beginning.
So yeah, I think that was really where it kind of started, and so and it really started after about when she was about 5 years old, and we had to start figuring out a place to send her to school. And we lived in Dallas at the time, and we weren't crazy about the idea of sending her to a public school in the Dallas school system. And so we started looking into private schools. I was raised in the Episcopal Church until I walked away at about the age of 18. And but the Episcopal Church has a long heritage of having educational facilities associated with their churches. So, grade schools and junior highs. And I'm not sure if there are any high schools out there. I'm sure there probably are. But so that was really trying to come up with a place to send her to a private school. I kind of had this, I don't know, knowledge or trust of the Episcopal Church that she could at least go there and get an education, plus have an education that kind of had a moral foundation associated to it. So it was important to me that she get that as well. So even though I was having nothing to do with the church and really wasn't interested in it, I still recognized the moral foundation that it provided. And so that was kind of the start of it. And, over the years, my wife and I developed a relationship with the priest and his wife and their family at the church associated with the school. And there were, just I kind of look at it as kind of just not straws, but more like feathers that were falling down from the sky that eventually just kind of broke. They piled up and just finally broke the camel's back. I started engaging in this dialogue, maybe a monologue within my own head about it. But in retrospect, it was, much like Jacob wrestling with the devil, or not with the devil, with the angel. Yeah, you can edit that out. Jacob wrestling with the angel at the river. And I finally just reached a point where I just got tired of wrestling, and I couldn't win the argument. I couldn't win the wrestling match. And so I just cried uncle and submitted myself to the Lord. And that was back in 2012. And so now have just been, and one of the things that now in retirement that I want to do, this gift that I've been given, my creativity and my skills, I just want to use that much like Bach does, and just dedicate my work, to him, and ask for his help in creating these works. And
I'd love to see more good Christian art, because
yes, that's a fine line right there, because there's that that cheesiness that you can get is it's a really hard line to walk, because it's so easy to become trite and
yeah, and it seems like you only really get the extremes when it comes to something like film, me being a film nerd. If you either get Terrence Malick, these really deep Christian themes, or you get God's not dead or something that's
Right.
really low grade.
Right,
Like,
Left Behind,
yeah,
or something.
yeah. My parents read us the Left Behind books as kids, which, you know, it's not like we've talked about it. I'm sure they, in retrospect now, they'd be like, yeah, that probably wasn't a good idea, because I was maybe 8. They'd be reading about, and the Apollyon came out of the earth and stung people, and they were trying to kill themselves, but they couldn't die, and I was just like,
You know, we've been having this discussion with some other friends of ours about the Left Behind series and stuff, and you know, young people kind of more in your age group, and they were terrified by them. Just uh, they'd see something happening, and oh my gosh, the world's about to end, and
yeah.
so
And they're all growing up. It was the debate on just if the Pope was the Antichrist or if it was Obama.
yeah.
And so, welcome to the South.
Yeah.
This is I forget the word. Is it ageist or something? Question of, you're a person who's seen some days, and so I'm interested. I used to ask my grandparents this question of, what's something that you think you liked better about when you were a kid or a young man that you think actually was better, and then something you think has changed that is definitely for the better. Sometimes people just have an over romantic vision of the past, but then sometimes they also won't accept the good things that are happening in the present.
I like the fact that growing up, we didn't have social media.
Mhm.
I mean, everything we did was basically analog.
You just had social.
Yeah, and it was true social,
Uh-huh.
with other people, and actually doing real things instead of doing sort of I don't even know what social media, what kind of impact that's really having. It's really hard to say.
Mhm.
But I think I liked that aspect of it.
Do you think there's a secret cause to people connecting in the real world? Like, how do we get back to that place of, obviously social media is here to stay,
Yeah.
but how how could we maybe get back to a point of where it's not like pulling teeth to actually get humans together in person?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think church is one of those ways, and CTK is doing a good job of doing it. I think people maybe
Yeah, CDK being the
yeah,
Christ King, the Anglican
right,
church around here.
um, and maybe church in general, but I think that people just may reach a point where they're just starving, they're just hungry for true social interaction, as opposed to interaction across texting or
Mm-hmm.
a phone or a computer, or I don't know. They're liable to be just embedding these things into our heads before long.
Uh-huh.
So it may just be a thirst that's gonna, or a hunger that's going to help
Mm.
kind of bring people back together to do that. But I think people, I don't know. I, uh, I mean, I wasn't aware of and couldn't conceive of postmodernism when I was younger. I forget when I even really first heard the term and kind of came to understand what it meant. But um, I think postmodernism has really, the dangers of postmodernism are really rearing its ugly head right
Mhm.
now. And where anybody's truth
Mhm.
is somehow valid, despite the fact that I have not yet found where um, two diametrically opposed things can both be true. One has to be true and the other has to be false.
Yeah.
They can't both be true. And so, but there's a lot of people out there with diametrically opposed views right now who are both staking their claim that their view is the truth, and that just can't be.
Yeah, I took a screenshot of something I'd seen the other day and showed it to my brother, and it was a post just about like all religions are essentially teaching the same thing. I think that's something you can only really say if you don't know anything about religion or about history, or
Right.
there are obviously common threads. And a lot of times people maybe make a bigger deal out of certain differences than they ought, but there are major differences between all sorts of groups, and yeah, there on one hand it's really hard to, I think the internet, one of the curses of it in growing up with it, being one of the first generations to grow up with it, is just so much information about all of these religious groups, and it makes it very confusing of, there's good and bad, and for every, which one's valid if they all have their risings and fallings. And the Catholic Church has probably done more charity for the world than any other organization, but they also have their scandals, and also from every kind of group. It just all seems, how do you process all this information and without it being the way, have a nuanced view without it being super postmodern of all things go, or really old school where this is the way it is and no exceptions.
Right. Yeah, there's that song by John Lennon, Imagine. And, one of the lines is, imagine there's no religion. It's easy if you can. Well, to me, it's easier to imagine the world without religion. And without religion, and I'm not just speaking Christianity, but basically without any religion at all, it's just it would be a nightmarish, hellish place. You don't want to imagine a world without religion, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a lot of all the art and music and beauty, and even just interviewing my brother last time, it was more hearing his perspective. We have our differences because I'm like really similar to him, but just on the other side of the fence, because it's hard for me to piece together and make sense of the world and religion. But in my mind, there's got to be meaning and purpose, and if there was no meaning or purpose, and it's just all things go, how do you get a society to agree on a common vision of more than, obviously everyone pretty much can agree you don't kill people, you don't steal from people, but there's a lot of the devil's in the details, and it's really hard to work out a societal agreement without some common vision or religion of sorts that's like a higher ideal to strive for.
Right, because if without the true God-given truth or God-given rights, they're all the rules are man-made.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just who happens to be in power who is making the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there are still some norms. You mentioned killing being one of them, which we try to stay away from, and we kind of all are in agreement that that's not good. But really, in a materialistic, world in which energy and matter and electrons bumping around and the rest of that, in a truly materialistic view of the universe, there is no right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and there are sociopathic, narcissistic people out there who they'll just do anything at any cost and without any thought for anybody else.
Yeah.
And in their view of the world, that's okay.
Yeah. And obviously most people who wouldn't consider themselves religious aren't, going out and murdering people.
Right.
But at the same time, there's not really a logical foundation for a lot of that, because one of the big deterrents of atheism for me was listening to Richard Dawkins talk about morality, which is a person I respect immensely and think has a lot of great criticisms of just the world and religion. But he was asked if rape was objectively wrong, and this really isn't. I'm not misrepresenting, I don't think, here what he was saying, but he basically just said, "I'm glad I live in a world, or in a part of the world where rape is considered wrong, but there's no, really is no right and wrong. It's just cultural agreements." And I thought, well, that just doesn't seem like a way you can build a society.
No, and that's exactly right. And I think that's the primary foundational problem with atheism,
Mm.
that there is no true moral right or wrong. It's everything really goes. If there is no God, then everything and anything can go.
Mm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people depart from organized religion for very understandable reasons. But what would you say? What would you say was one of the biggest ways that your day-to-day life changed when you went from a place of just wandering sort of aimlessly and agnostically to a place of faith? Um, yeah, what was the biggest practical outplay of that?
Um, I think it was mostly personal, but gave me a I think gave me a reason to just get up in the morning and
Mm.
try to do what was right. It helped me understand, at least for myself, what is right and what I wanted to accomplish and leave behind. But also just as a way of honoring, recognizing and honoring and being thankful and grateful for the gift of life, first of all, but the gifts associated with my life as well. My intelligence and my creativity, and then just trying to say thank you by utilizing those to the best that I'm able to,
Mm.
and thereby that being a reflection to others
Mm.
that there is a God out there, there is hope. Because I mean, I've in many, absolutely many aspects, I am, well, I'm the worst of all sinners, and as I think Paul famously said, and or something to that effect, and for somebody to see how my life has changed and the person I've become might be able to give them hope that they could change as well and make their lives better.
Mm. Yeah, I guess so much of a religion is something you redo, like I think it comes from ligament, and like it's something that binds and then redo again. So it's the things you do over and over that add up. And so that process is to build you into a man or woman and person of character. And since you've had a career, you've raised a family, done all these been through all these milestones of just manhood or personhood. So what do you have any just general advice you'd give to maybe young men in particular of things that, hey, look out for this, try this, don't try that?
Boy, giving advice, that's a dangerous thing because
Maybe even sometimes advice seems is such a strong word because it seems like I've gotten here and now I will share from the mountaintop. But maybe something that you think, I wish I would have done more of this, or I'm really glad that I did this, and and it would encourage others to do the same.
um, I don't know. For my life, I mean, I wish I had kind of wised up sooner than I did, but at the same time, the mistakes that I made were mistakes I kind of had to make to come to the realization of where I am.
Mm.
So I don't necessarily believe that um, God has his hand on you and is guiding you at every moment throughout your life. Basically, I'm a person who believes in free will, and that we're given our free will, and God may have a plan for us, but he doesn't enforce it. I've heard it kind of, and I don't know if you remember the old Garmin GPS
Yeah.
units, but they would be recalculating. It's kind of like, you're here, he wants you to be here. You're kind of wandering around like this, and you're able to make, decisions. And how he's going to get you from here to here, he's constantly having to recalculate. Reassess how, what kind of signposts he might put up for you to, follow a particular fork in the path. But just because that signpost is there doesn't mean that you're going to follow it. So be less impulsive and more kind of forward thinking about how your actions might actually impact you and others before you pull the trigger and decide to do something. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe,
There's
just give it some more thought. Give it a second thought before jumping in.
Yeah, there's a Leonard Cohen song called Slow where he says, I've always liked it slow, I've never liked it fast. You want to get there now, I want to get there last. And there's something he says about, for you it's got to go, for me it's got to last. And that's always stuck with me of, it's doing things that, it's always been important to me to do things that are meaningful and that I've thought through. And even I heard in a really good podcast the other day about how how your house operates, like you and your spouse, and who does the dishes and who does this chore. Like, we think of those things as micro things, but those are the things that you're doing, both house tasks and relational tasks, that you're doing every day for your whole life. And so those are really the macro things. And if you just think about, okay, how do we set this up and actually communicate about it and build up a practice, a healthy practice, and actually think through it, and that can really make all the difference in the world over time, instead of getting bitter and resentful because you haven't communicated about certain things and you're just not doing it well, or in a way that you're wasting a bunch of time or energy. And and then circling back to your art some, what is your why as an artist? The sort of the driving force behind it.
I don't know if I can answer the why. I mean, it's just something that I kind of have to do. Well, part of it is, as an engineer and working in the corporate America and being a mechanical engineer originally, and then working my way into robotics and computer science and engineering, and finishing my career as a project manager. The things that I did, there's a lot of people out there that can do those things. So I was replaceable. When I left my job, somebody else could step in and go ahead and finish those projects and the rest of that. But whenever I make a work of art, I'm the only person on the planet that can make that work of art. That is from me. I mean, there's no AI, there's no other person that can do that. That is me. And that's a gift that God gave me to be able to do that. And so by doing that, I'm honoring that gift that he gave me. So I guess that's really the why, because I just want to do it. But I did it for many years without knowing that that's what I was doing or why I was doing it.
Yeah.
That's the realization that I've come to now, and the reason I really want to, pursue that in my, this last third of my life, or whatever amount of time is still left. So
yeah, I can relate a little too hard to that, because this is a I wouldn't even say it's not a debate that Alexa and I have, my wife, is more as a continuing conversation of more and more I just want to outsource all of the things that other people can do and focus on the things that I feel like I'm really good at and that only I could do. Because I
Mhm.
would rather, I mean, so much of like currency in life is your time. That's because you can, what will it matter if I have more money at the end of my life as opposed to if I spent some money and paid some people to outsource this or that thing and could actually do both the creative projects and art projects I'd want to work on that I feel like really only I can do, as opposed to thinking, I spent this amount of time editing pictures or videos, and because more and more it's I it's not that I don't enjoy my day job of, because I love shooting things and being with people and taking pictures and videos, but then a lot of the behind the computer, more and more, I just kind of hate it. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to be behind a computer. I want to be
Yeah.
with people doing the things that I can do and hopefully outsourcing more of that work and making more creative films and
Mhm.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you asked earlier about, what advice would you have to somebody, um, that, and our talk here has led to, me thinking about that a little bit different. One of the things that I regret, or that I wish I had done, was to be more courageous in terms of willingness to take chances.
Mm.
So I do wish that, uh, I'm thankful for my career and what that bought me in terms of retirement and being able to retire comfortably and hopefully leaving something for my daughter when I'm gone, and all the rest of that. But, um, there are also, there are artists out there that are very successful and make a lot of money and leave legacies for their children. And
Mm.
um, I I just wish I'd been more courageous in terms of being more willing to take chances and not being so, uh, I don't know, reluctant to risk
Mm.
financial setbacks.
Mm.
Um, I think doors would have opened. I would have figured things out, and I would encourage people to be more, try to encourage them to believe more in themselves and their abilities, and take some risk,
Yeah.
calculated risk,
Yeah. That's
not be afraid. So less fear and more courage, I guess.
mhm. Yeah, I'm really gung ho about that at this stage in my life just because, yeah, I have a fear. It's not like I'm afraid I'm gonna die young or
Uh-huh.
anything, but I don't want to die or get to the end of my life and think I wish I would have done this, or like I'm really trying to think through what do I actually want to do with my life, because why live a life just sort of bouncing from thing to thing that you're supposed to do. And of course you have to do your basics and your duties and support a
Yeah.
family and that kind of thing. But if I can do all those things and express these other creative things that I have in me, that because it's almost it's like a I'm trying to think of how to describe it in a way that doesn't sound conceited, because it's like you have everyone has their own precious metal inside themselves that they can give to the world, and you don't want that
Mhm.
to be lost to the throughout history and throughout time, and like you just die and that never have gotten out into the world.
Mhm.
And so I really want to make that happen.
Mhm. Well, good. I highly encourage you to take those steps. So,
If you had to think through something that maybe mattered to you a lot 10 or 20 years ago, but no longer does, and vice versa, something that wasn't really on your radar, but now has become not necessarily front and center, but a big part of your life, what would two of those things be?
yeah, so say that again.
Yeah, sorry, it's a double. First off, what's something that used to matter a lot to you, but now you've sort of thought, this isn't quite as important as I once thought it was?
Uh-huh. I did get things out of my job. I got respect from my coworkers and the people working for me on projects. So I did get that. But the security that afforded me, that I don't miss my professional career at all now. It's kind of like I was doing something for somebody else, and it was I I just don't care about it. That I'm proud of it, but at the same time, it's like nobody's going to really remember much of anything that there was no project that changed the world.
Uh,
Nothing that I did really as an engineer that did much of anything except provide for my family and my education of my daughter. So I mean, it accomplished things, but in a very roundabout way. So that's something that I didn't, I don't care about as much as I did then.
and did you ever see the film Banshees of Inisherin?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, um, do you know the premise of it?
I've heard it, but I can't recall what it was.
Well, it's not like this is a spoiler because it happens pretty early on. But basically, it's two friends, and it starts off with the guy going to the pub to have a drink with his good bud, and his friend doesn't want to talk to him anymore and tells him, "I don't want to be friends anymore." Basically, because you're boring and you're not adding, like you're just running your mouth and having fun. And I want to make art. I want to make a symphony, and I want to do things with my life that'll last. And it's this whole debate throughout the movie of him and this other guy, because the other guy is saying, I remember my mom, and she was kind, she was nice, and that's more valuable than your stupid piece of art and that you think people will remember you by. But I can really relate to both struggles, and it's not that I want to be remembered for my art as much as you want to do something that you feel like resonated and impacted people. And so can you speak some to is that a struggle you have in yourself, and is like the debate between, the things that you have to do, like even you had your engineering job and maybe made some bridges that people go over every day, and that's really useful to society. But then it's hard to draw that like really higher meaning from. The day to day meaning versus the more like big scale, something you gave to the world meaning.
Yeah. So from a work perspective like that, even though it sounds like I'm dismissing the value of what I did, we don't really know what kind of impact the things that we are doing are going to have on other people. So, for instance, am I getting up every day and going to work to put my daughter? We talked earlier about her going to private school, but sending her to private school, and then she's seeing me get up every day and go do something that I didn't really necessarily want to do or was not inspired to do, except as a way to provide for her and my wife, and give them a nice house and home. And so I did that, but that example that I set, now my daughter is 30 years old and is working as a social worker, and so she's out there really helping people get through really serious struggles. So indirectly, I helped help raise a person who's now in the world, I mean, really doing hands-on things and really helping other people in tangible ways and making their lives, helping to heal them, basically. I mean, she's a doctor in some ways. She doesn't have, not a medical doctor and not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but she's still helping people in very practical ways deal with the issues that they have and becoming functioning members of society. So that's, it had an impact. And I also had impact on people, I think, at work, and was there when certain people were in times of need and needed prayer. And in the workplace, that's not something that necessarily somebody confides in you something, and you don't often, or a lot of people don't often have somebody just offer to pray for them or pray with them about what they're doing. So, in that respect, I think that it was very definitely a struggle for me, and it's even now it's kind of hard to see what I accomplished, what the value of that aspect of my life really was.
Mhm. Yeah, Alexis is an ER nurse, and so she just has like very intense interactions every day. And just yesterday, she was with a lady who had a miscarriage, and it was very graphic and intense. And like it's awful, but it's also being there for people and helping them through some of the hardest times in their life. So it's very intrinsically meaningful, and in a way, I would never do a job like that because I'm not cut out for it. But there's a massive respect and admiration for people that, are just making the world run. I met a guy who the other day who puts up power lines, and you just don't think like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I sure am glad that the lights are on and that the fridge works and all those kinds of things. And it's not very sexy,
Right.
or it's not a movie star or a big piece of art. But that being said, what would it look like for you to? We're always a work in progress, but what would it look like for you to have really made it in life? Like when you're on your deathbed, what kind of person would you want to have wanted to become, and what kind of things would you have wanted to do?
I would still, even though my daughter's 30 years old, I'd still like to become a better father than I've been to this point. And I would like to be a better husband than I've been to continue to try to be a better husband than I've been to my wife thus far. So I'd like to have, and I'd like to be a better brother um, to my brother and my sisters. Um, I'd like to be known as a kind person and a good person, even though I've been very unkind and not good things to many and hurt a lot of people throughout my life. Um, so I would hope for forgiveness from those people and hope for the opportunity to ask for forgiveness. But I don't know if we talked a little bit about Mark Rothko, but one of my pieces, the Rothko-esque Holy Family Nativity that I did. Mark Rothko was an artist. He was a secular Jew from uh, Eastern Europe, and he struggled in his life. And I think he was a searcher. He was looking for meaning in his life and never found it. And committed suicide, I think, when he was 69. His paintings, abstract as they are, they are not meaningless paintings, even though they are abstract, and you can't necessarily look at them in a way that says this painting is about this. And it's more like the cloud shapes that he's got. He saw them as almost beings, and there were relationships between them, and they were interacting. They were almost, in his mind, theatrical, and they were communicating something. They were showing relationships, and I think that there are people who, it was kind of like the ultimate compliment to him, that there would be people who would see his paintings and just break down crying. And I've had the great fortune of and my Rothko painting, Rothko-esque Holy Family Nativity. I've had one person at least tell me that it made her cry just looking at it. And so for me, that's like kind of like the ultimate compliment as well. And so if my art can speak to somebody in such a way that it can somehow make them question something and come to some sort of a realization, a, a real realization about some aspect of their life, and help them to come to know God. I think that would be, what I would want.
Yeah, well, that's a solid answer. And so I usually try to wrap things up with I love practical stuff and very hands-on things. And so I usually ask people to come up with a practical challenge they might give people to just sort of bring all these thoughts and ideas to flesh and blood of something they could do that would make them more creative, more loving, more interested, more compassionate. And so is there something you can think of that you might challenge people as basic as, take a friend out and ask them to tell their story, to, maybe some sort of artistic challenge or something like that?
Try to set aside a certain time each day, be it the beginning of your day, at the end of your day, whatever. And even if it's only for 5 or 10 minutes, but to just take some time to pray. But do it as regularly as possible every day. I think that repetitiveness of doing something every day, and it may be, you may do it one day, you may do it the next day and not really feel anything, or each day you may not do it. But at the end of a period of time, you can begin to see something, it having some sort of an impact. Not necessarily something that you're striving for, but there's something will happen, I think, if you just take a few minutes every day to do that.
Consistency. Yeah. And I think even from people who come at life from a less religious perspective, there can be a lot of value in praying as a way to focus and you know instill values and disciplines in you, or virtues, just thinking, maybe if you're not saying, God, help me be patient, or help me be, just trying to think, I'm gonna, can I try to be patient today? And sometimes I really love written prayers, because it sort of takes away the having to come up with everything, and just finding ways of, these are virtues and I want to instill in myself, and I'm just going to be chewing on and asking, reaching out for help to, be this kind of person. And so that's
So are you talking, you like prayers that have already been written out and you reading those, or you like to write your prayers out?
No, sometimes I've been an editor of prayers, and, stitch together various prayer books and things. And but just whether it's an Eastern Orthodox prayer book or an Anglican prayer book, or something like that, just finding those little gems of things that I feel like are good classic virtues. Some of the classic prayers, like the serenity and serenity prayer and those sorts of things.
Well, I have started a discipline. I've been doing it for several months now, where my prayer time in the morning, I just do. I I give myself basically 5 minutes of try to be silent prayer. I mean, I don't say anything. I try to clear my mind, but that doesn't work. My mind is still running. But I'm not like, dear God, do this. It's just kind of like things are going through my mind. And then I have taken up this discipline of drawing my prayers.
Oh, okay.
And I'll just show you
Yeah.
this and these. And so each day I'll do a drawing. And they're not necessarily something specific. It's just letting my mind just go. There's no verbal, I don't even know what I'm necessarily praying for. It's just a prayer, and I'm just offering it up to God, and he can do with it as he sees fit.
I love this. This is great. I wish I was a little more. I can't draw very well, it's just not one of the creative.
Well, you see, the thing is, you can't look at those and say I draw well either. You just
But this is
but you can,
especially like the color depth in this, and yeah, it's pretty lovely. Like this could be a piece.
yeah. Well, that's part of some of these I will take eventually and turn them
Uh-huh.
into paintings.
Is this another one?
Yeah.
I'll take some close-ups to show off some of these. But yeah, I love this kind of expression and focus. This is such a unique way of prayer. I have a song that I find very prayerful that's actually by the band Tool. And it's just we barely remember who or what came before this precious moment, choosing to be here right now. And it's very focused on just trying to focus on the present moment, become the kind of person you want to be, and so I think I'll usually listen to that as a pre-workout, and because it's even like a 3-minute prelude before the real song starts, because they have really long songs, and so it's nice to just like breathe and kind of pray that, and then just start pumping iron.
Yeah.
Because I feel like at some point you mentioned some sort of story of more performative art that you'd done. It was maybe you were at a party a long time ago and were protesting some war.
Oh, yeah, that was yeah, so that's actually a party that I was at with my where I met Mary, my wife Mary.
Oh, really?
It was a Halloween party, and I had dressed as apartheid, and so
when was this?
this was in probably 1983, something like that. And it was in Dallas, and there was a group of real estate developers who would buy large warehouse buildings and then renovate them. And after they purchased the property, the group they called themselves the Fly Killers, and they would, before they started renovation on the property, they would open it up and have a big party then there with like 4 or 5 bands in different parts of the complex and free beer, and just people would come and do stuff, but you had to be invited. They didn't advertise it. You just had to be in the know. So this was a Halloween party that they had, and so I dressed up as apartheid, and it was just a kind of a military jumpsuit, and then I had a globe on my head, and I had 3 of the countries in Africa were cut out for eyes, and then South Africa was, when it was still Zimbabwe, I guess, was under apartheid, and I had that cut out for the mouth, and it was just kind of a protest sort of thing.
Oh, I love stuff like that. That's interactive, whether you want it to be or not, where you're just bringing your art into the world, and people have to, react.
So yeah, Mary, for some reason, was attracted to that and saw me holding my globe. Finally, took my globe off and had it under my arm, and she came over and started talking to me. So I have, that was one good result of that performance.
Yeah, well, that's great. I love that. But anyway, yeah, thank you for coming, and
I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Until next time.
All right, thanks.